for the work. I mean, everybody contributed. We all came to the table. Everybody gathered around the concept of shared, and this was really good. So this is what you're going to hear. Take it away, Chris. Please.
All right.
Well, and ditto for the other group.
So for the record, Chris Roop, Joint Fiscal, I had the pleasure of sitting with the members from the teachers union as we talked about what folks were interested in taking a look at. So this is where the group arrived at. Sort of to help compare apples to apples with one of the scenarios that was costed out by the VSERS group, there was some desire to revise the state revenue assumption to mirror what was in the one VSERS one. So that would be 75 million one time, 15 million recurring. So that data already exists. It's a matter of just kind of having the actuaries put it over into the table so we can sort of all view it in one place and update one or two timing assumptions. Another thing that folks are interested in looking at is further exploring the idea of coupling a longevity incentive with a freeze. So this is sort of combining the first and the third options that we talked about earlier today that the actuaries weighed in on. So I think the thinking is, you know, if a incentive payment can be provided out of non-pension assets and that payment is not included in the average final compensation calculation, would that incentivize people to continue working past where sort of maxes are right now, and on the condition that they freeze their benefit while they continue working and stop paying contributions? So this is kind of, I think the intent here is to sort of offer a carrot or a sweetener that would encourage people to not only continue working and have more people continue working beyond when they can retire, but it would also sort of be coupled with entering into the freeze, and then people keep some of the money out of their pay at the same time. And then to cost it out, see, using the same behavioral assumptions that VSERS offered during the last round, but instead of having just a scenario that says, you know, 100% of assumed do it and 50% have 25, 50, and 75 as well. So we have a little bit of a range there to work with. Sir.
Just at one point, we discussed the idea of that bonus piece, not necessarily coming from the 150 million that's earmarked, but when we have the ed surplus being the source of that longevity bonus.
But that's nothing that we need to consider right now. We're just trying to consider something to get into the hands of the actuary. He's not done.
I got more. Progressive employee contributions. In the last round, there was an option that was costed out where income fell in various brackets, kind of like a progressive income tax. You pay a different rate. The group has expressed interest in modifying those rates and adding another category. So we'll ask the actuaries to cost out the impact of people paying 5.5% on their first 40,000 of income, 6.25% on income between 40 and 60,000, 7.5% on income between 60 and 80,000, 8.25% on income between 80 and 100,000, and 9.25% on income over 100,000. Then lastly, there's some interest in taking a look at some COLA modifications. So see what the impact would be if a $24,000 threshold was set that was adjustable by the CPI beginning in FY24. So the COLA would only be on that first $24,000 of retirement income a year, and then that $24,000 would be adjusted by the CPI in the future. And then run a couple different options there. What would it look like if we maintain sort of the status 50% of CPI formula? What would happen if we moved it to a 100% of CPI formula? And then layer in what would happen if we delay the implementation of the COLA for 24 months and then 36 months to see what those impacts would be. And there was some discussion around once the fund reaches a better place, the number that was thrown about was, when it reaches 80% funded, for example, that these restrictions could then be relaxed, provided that, it wouldn't cause the fund to go below 80% funded. This is something that, it may be a little bit beyond the scope of the actuaries to analyze in the near term. And there's so much uncertainty about so many factors that even if they can analyze it, I think we probably need to take it with a little grain of salt. But I think there was some intent expressed that should there be a recommendation made in this front, that would be part of the recommendation, that once the fund reaches that level of pension health, that folks would renegotiate, if you will, or revisit the issue. So I hope I captured that right, but if I missed anything, please jump in and correct me.
Yeah, we really, and thank you, Chris. You captured it well. The risk sharing and then with a trigger point was very important across the ball. So the 80% came out of thin air, and I'm the one that pulled it out of thin air. I kind of was listening to Tom Galaka some when I was pulling it out of thin air, and so that's where we came up with the 80%. So not scientifically determined.
So what do you want to do now? Do you want to have John or Eric talk about, John, you took the notes, I guess.
Sure.
About the suggestions that came up in this room.
Right. So just to help people, I'm going to start on page 9 of the presentation that Chris went through this morning. Just people, so we focus first on contributions. And, first of all, I want to thank everybody. Everybody contributed to this. There's a lot of good ideas and with respect to the different things that we looked at. And we looked at several different things. I'm going to start with contributions, but then I'll go on from there. And there are both changes for Group F and Group C. So the first thing that we're suggesting modifying is in Group F contributions, there was 3 tiers that were used in the original scenarios, and moving that to a 4-tier system for just a single new scenario, which would be for people in the 0 to 24th percentile, there'd be no change, which is consistent with the existing scenarios. 25 to 50%, it would be a 0.5% increase in contributions for 3 years. For 50 to 75 percentile, it would be a 0.5% increase every year for 4 years. And then for 75% percentile and above, it would be a 0.5% per year increase for 5 years. So that's one change we made. And other thing that we discussed was a risk sharing component, which is that after that 5 years, so we have this 5 years of increases, contributions would be tied to increases in the normal cost. So if there is a 1% increase in normal costs, there'd be a 1% increase in contributions. That's just an example, right?
In the contribution amount.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just have a clarifying question on that.
Sure.
Are these contribution increases, are we just talking about for Group F? Are all the contribution increases are just for Group F? Or is that for Group C also?
So with respect to Group C, we replicate or duplicate the 5-year thing that I just referenced. And the other Group C contribution changes, I mean, Dan thought that option 1 for Group C that we already ran is more palatable.
Okay.
But we've already run those numbers. And so there's no change with respect to that.
Okay. And on the 5-year normal cost, is the intent that if the normal cost increases as a percentage of payroll by like 1%, that employee contributions would increase by 1%? Or I'm just trying to make sure I know what percentages of what we're counting here.
I'm going to let Eric speak. This is Eric's idea, but
Yeah, no, good idea. I'm interested. I mean, I'm happy to have others help flesh it out though. So I'm trying to think of normal cost. Normal cost as percentage of payroll. I don't know how to answer the question. What are you thinking?
I mean, I just need to, understand what magnitude of increase is going to trigger what magnitude of increase. So are you thinking, is your intent that the employer share of the normal cost as a percentage of pay would be relatively static at current rates? And that, like, if it goes from 12% of pay to 13% of pay, that 1% is somehow split among the employee groups, or?
Yeah, I think that's the intent. It would be to establish this first schedule that would kind of set the proportions between employer and employee, and the risk sharing component would keep those percentages static over time, so that when the normal costs go up, the employer and employees share.
Okay. Has any thought been given to what happens if the normal cost goes down?
We didn't have that discussion, Andrew and I did at lunch.
Okay.
That if we include this risk sharing concept on the upside, that it makes sense to include it on the
Downside.
downside.
Okay.
So it'd be a risk reward sharing.
Okay. So I think I have this where after 5 years and you revisit, and you see what that balance is about who's paying what share of the total normal cost. From then on, any growth in the normal cost as a percentage of pay above that sort of baseline 5 years out is apportioned to the active membership.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the growth is apportioned equally.
It's apportioned equally.
Yes.
Okay. So the employee would pay 50% of the increase above. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
No, thank you for asking me a question. I appreciate it.
Um, Okay, so then I'm switching to page 13, which was Group C changes. Again, Dan thought option 2 is probably more palatable, but we were proposing to run a similar scenario for Group F, which would be, we'd have 3 groups, or we'd have 3 retirement assumptions for Group F, which would be 10% would retire with 3 years additional retirement, and then 5% with 5 years more, 10 years, and then 85% would just work the same.
Yeah, so we have that population of folks who are continuing to work without any incentive. That population would increase by 10%. Those employees would work 3 extra years, and an additional, another 5% would work 5 years. I would welcome any, we're trying to build off this framework that Group C to try to put some bounds on how an incentive might reasonably change people's behavior in terms of participating versus retirement. And that was, I think that was our best sort of guess at how to maybe get at that.
Yeah. So are you thinking is there going to be a maximum on this, or are we just assuming that, like a 5-year maximum or whatever? Are we just assuming that Group F's benefit would go up by 1% of AFC, and just saying that, 85% are going to do what we're already assuming, but 10% will stay 3 extra years and 5% will stay extra 5?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Has any thought been given about how many will stay for 2 or 4? Or would you like us to ask the actuaries to make an educated guess?
We had that question. We were wondering if the actuaries could help us.
I'll ask them. Yeah, ask them. And that's the 1% max benefit for, okay,
Correct.
Group F.
So that was an overall question we had with some of these assumptions, which are based on how many people are going to do different things. And we don't know if it's appropriate to ask this question, but based on the work Siegel does for many different pensions, do they have any sort of history with these types of retirement incentives?
Yeah, I asked that question and I didn't get a particularly substantive answer, but at the very least, what I'll ask is if we give them these assumptions, do they sort of pass the smell test? And does it make sense from their perspective, or should we be thinking about something else? Does it feel conservative? Does it feel aggressive? We can ask those questions.
Okay, and then moving on to page 14, just rerunning option 6 with behavioral changes.
Those are the same changes we just discussed? Yeah.
Think so, yeah.
Okay. So going back to the previous page when we were looking at Group C, were there any changes we needed to make on Group C? Or were we going to?
No, I think we're fine. Okay, so that's.
One quick question I have is, and this is sort of in the interest of trying to manage time and budget. If we ask them to rerun the option 6 max benefit 1% with those behavioral parameters, are we asking them to rerun that for every single scenario that they've paired it with, or can we take some things off the table? Because there was a lot of combined scenarios.
We did not discuss that.
It may not be a big deal. I'm raising the question to see if your conversation went there.
Right, we did not. We did have some questions about the various combinations. I mean, some of the combinations were run twice, one with the assumption that people within 5 years of retirement would be held harmless. And that was done for, I believe, 4 different scenarios. We did have the question of why we didn't do that for all the different scenarios.
GH, O, and B were the ones that had the exclusions, but the rest did not.
So O and Q are sort of versions of the same one. They're the same analyses, but there's one excludes the 5 years, one doesn't, and P and R are similar, but they made that exclusion.
Right,
too.
we-
Right, there's an A through what?
Yeah, see, I mean, we got that G and H are similar to I and J, and that O and P are similar to Q and R, with the exception that the latter exclude active employees within 5 years of retirement. So we figured that out. It was just, we were wondering about, for example, as Leona just said, is what about combos A through F? Why didn't we run those with a 5-year hold harmless?
We can ask them.
Yeah.
I thought that was in my request, but yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
So you want to rerun A through F to do the 5-year exclusion
Yeah. to see.
of changes to
Yeah.
COLA.
And as long as we're on the combo scenarios, one of the things we discussed, because there are multiple groups within the state employees pension is, and I don't know if the actuaries need to do this, but totaling up the impact on the ADAC and the unfunded liability for both Group C and Group F, and hopefully Group D changes.
Those are additive. So
No, I know that. When
yeah.
we discussed that, we were discussing, but just to see it somewhere so we can see the total impact on the state employee pension.
Okay.
So I don't know if the actuary needs to do work on that, but at some point, it would be good to see how we are doing with respect to the targets that are set in Act 75. Does that make sense?
It does. And I attempted and I probably missed a couple things in the interest of time, but I attempted toward the end to put a list together that shows Group C and Group F benefit changes on the same chart. These are just the individual options, so these are not paired combinations. If there are paired combinations people would like us to add, I can do that. I didn't have enough time yesterday before this year to do it, but we can certainly do that. But yeah, whatever you're doing with Group C's benefit and Group F's benefit generally can be added and make a list that you can add down to see how far you get to the total target, because how you change one group's benefit structure doesn't adversely interact with the other group's benefit structure.
Right. Okay, so we did, what else? We did something on COLAs. Where'd it go? Okay, so we already talked. So, oh yeah. So with respect to COLAs on page 14, we already have a risk sharing COLA for Group C, but Dan would also like us to run 2 of the Group F scenarios for Group C, which are the 24-month and 36-month.
I think it's D&E.
It's D&E. Yep. Mhm. And I think, let me just go through quickly. They start everything that we're supposed to do. I think that's everything. Okay. If there's anything else that I forgot, please,
I just had a question.
please shout.
Was it, did you say the risk sharing for COLA that is applied to Group C, modeling it on Group F also?
No, the COLA risk sharing is already there. What Dan asked for is us to also run the COLA scenarios that we ran for Group F, where I think we didn't have a COLA for 24 or 36 months.
Correct. Those are 2 of the 6 individual options on.
Yes.
page
Right.
14. Yeah, we can, sure. Okay. I think I've got what I need. What my goal is, I'm gonna write everything up and send it around to everybody to make sure I got it right. And then we'll ship it over to the actuaries and we'll try to get that done.
And I would.
I did forget. We did have a discussion of attempting to run the scenarios for corrections of moving them to Group C. The one thing that we talked about that and I don't know if the actuaries can take this into consideration or not, is the issue of cross-subsidization. And, if we're going to hold harmless the employer with respect to moving corrections, the corrections people identified in the scenario 5 that you put together, do we need to take into account cross-subsidization? I think that's. But the scenarios other than that would not change.
And Andrew, I think you had a question?
Yes, yeah. One of the things we need to clarify, Chris, I was thinking about our talk about the COLA pieces. We had a discussion about exempting people from 5 years out, but I don't think we actually came to any sort of decision there. So running to the scenarios for COLA.
Andrew, are you suggesting to run it with the 5 years and without? Like,
Right,
ways?
because I think the way that we have it currently right now does not exempt people within 5 years of
Okay.
retirement. So
So add that.
having that in there.
And just to, yeah, we can do that. And just to clarify, we're exempting them from the COLA changes, right? Not from the phased in higher contributions or, changes to the incentives or things like that. We wouldn't want to do that, obviously. Yeah, just the COLA changes. Okay.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Got it all? And I would say if you're gonna write this up and send it out, in order to make sure that we get it to the actuaries, what is your timing in sending it out to people? Because I would put a time limit on us to respond to you.
As soon as I get back to my computer.
Okay, so I would say that by tomorrow afternoon, we need to have any.
Tomorrow noon?
I would say the sooner tomorrow, the better.
Okay, so,
I would love to get this in front of them in the morning.
So I asked
Okay.
Chris how long this would likely take, and he may have a different answer to that now that he's heard everything, but He said a week to 10 days.
Okay,
I hope.
He hopes.
but so if we can,
But we know we got a little delay on this final scenario that we only got yesterday instead of on Monday.
so if, knowing that we all have a free evening tonight, if we can look at these and get back to Chris so he can get them to them as early tomorrow as possible. I know that's asking a lot, but we need to get this to them so that we can get it back to us. And it's just a matter of looking at it to make sure that what he got from the two groups is correct. Does that make sense? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for
No problem.
Okay. Right. We have a meeting scheduled for next Thursday. On our agenda, it says agenda planning. I'm not sure that if we will have stuff by next Thursday, or if there's, what's your pleasure, everybody? I know you have a lot of pleasures, but what's your, yes, Andrew?
We do still need to talk about having a second public hearing and ironing out some of the information on that. So that could definitely be a part of the agenda.
I'm going to make a comment about a public hearing. So I think that it would not be helpful to have a second public hearing until we know what we're going to be recommending. Because until we know what the recommendations are going to be, people can't respond to them. What I think makes sense here is that, and you can agree or disagree, but what makes sense to me is that Becky will be putting this into a bill. This will go into a bill and it will land in probably Senate Government Operations. And I would say that at that point, there is really stuff that people can respond to, and that's when we would have a public hearing.
When Becky puts something out there, our final report will have already been submitted.
Well, our final report will be turned into a bill.
I think if we have a sense after we get the information from actuaries where we're going, before we submit a final report, I would really love to get stakeholder input on what our thought process is there, because we will have things that we think we're putting out there before we finalize it in a document. And I would like people to have the opportunity to speak before something is finalized in a report.
And that makes sense. I would suggest that each group talk to their constituents. I don't know how on earth we will be able to have a public hearing after December 15th before January 1st. I mean, if we finalize the report on December 15th, assuming that we can finalize a report on December 15th. If we can't, Peter has suggested that we meet the week of between Christmas and New Year's and finalize the report. And that would leave us 3 days for a public hearing. I mean, that would leave us New Year's Eve probably for a public hearing.
I hear people stay up late then.
Not me.
The turnout will be really robust.
But
Just-
so I'm just saying that there will be chance for public hearing in response to the final draft, which will actually be a bill.
I think maybe what Andrew was suggesting is that we talk about this at our next meeting as part of the agenda.
Correct.
Well,
Not that we hash out right now whether or not there should be a second public hearing when Act 75 says that there would be public hearings. I just think he's suggesting we put it on the agenda to talk about next time.
We can do that. Okay. Anything else that should go on here?
I would like to review the scenarios that are we talking, just to clarify, since I wasn't clear last time, are we talking about agenda for next week?
Yes.
Okay, so to revisit our initial scenarios that we sent to Siegel back in August, I would just like to take a look at that to get a refresher on it. If Chris can take 15, 20 minutes to walk us through that again.
Yep.
The scenarios that we sent out, our very first scenario 2 and 3 to Siegel, which we're looking at one-time funds at 150, 250, 400, and the revenue of 30, 50, 75. I need a refresher on that.
Isn't there a YouTube stream that we could review in our own time? Yeah,
I'm happy to review. I'm also knowing that we're talking about agenda setting, and right now the only thing we have on our agenda setting for next week is discussion about a public hearing.
unless we get something back from the actuaries.
It does seem like it would be nice to review those in conjunction with the ones we received today, that just looking at it holistically could start to give us some possible sketches of what our final report might begin to look like. You know, those parts of the final report that weren't in the interim report. We might be able to start sketching some things out and looking at the numbers and, you know, oh, this would give us a 27%. This would give us a 43%, things like that. It might be nice to, it's almost like a work time, reviewing that and working in conjunction with the current, the ones we just received. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making any sense right now.
It makes sense. I just personally, I don't feel like it's a good use of time. But if that's what folks feel like they need to do as a group, then unless someone can think of a more efficient way to accomplish that. I mean, to me, it at some point, you know, you're gonna have to lay all of your information out in front of you and decide for yourself what you think is the right combination. And I don't know if it makes sense for us to use full group meeting time for each, you know, for people to do that.
So here's a suggestion. I'm not sure that this makes any sense. If the only thing that really would be on the agenda next week, because it could take a week to 10 days, and I think that we should go with the outside, the 10 days to get back to reports. Perhaps we should not meet next week and meet the 15th. By then, we would have all of the information. And we could each have looked at the information that we get back. We could review it and begin to think about the recommendations that on the meeting on the 15th of what the recommendations that we would like to put into the final report, given the information that's going to come back to us from the actuaries. And if we needed to have another meeting to try and do it the week of the 20th. Instead of, because that would be, we would have.
What about 2 meetings back to back, like the 15th and 16th?
Well, I can't do that because I have another committee meeting all day. And so does John.
And what about Tuesday and Wednesday?
We're meeting Tuesday, I mean Wednesday.
Right.
We're meeting Wednesday. She's suggesting maybe we meet Tuesday and Wednesday.
So we moved the 9th to the 14th.
Do that.
I can,
Won't work for me, 'cause I'm booked in 2 other committees that day.
the 14th. Okay. Well, what? Yeah, then that, I'm not sure that makes sense. Any other thoughts? I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm just aware that if the only thing we're going to talk about next week is a public hearing, I'm not sure it makes sense for us to meet.
What about December 20th? Is that what Peter was talking about?
I'd actually been talking about the following week. I hate to do anything during Christmas week, but the 20th is far enough away such that, I would certainly be here for that. Couple of other things I just want to make note of, because I thought of something that we haven't really talked about. But the other thing is that the House Appropriations Committee and Senate Appropriations Committee will be meeting 14, 15, 16, 17 December for the BAA. Now, what I will do is I'll look on.
BAA is budget adjustment.
Adjustment, yes. So every year we pass a state budget, but then at the mid-year mark, because the government is not allowed to move money around without the House and Senate's approval, we sit down and we right-size the budget to the actualities on the ground. And that is exactly what we will be doing, starting that process that week. What I'm going to do, because we're here, I'm going to pay attention to this agenda here, and I will probably be in and out of this meeting.
Yep.
Such that I can cover it. And I'll just watch Zoom to pick up what I missed upstairs, or rather right around the corner. The other thing is, we haven't yet talked about new hires and some type of a hybrid plan that I think that we should consider for new hires. I've asked Chris to send forward some ideas that he has pulled off of other states' ideas, in other words, steal the idea instead of reinvent the wheel. And so perhaps, Madam Chair, with your permission, to just send that around to everyone, and then we can talk about that at our next meeting.
So are you suggesting that in our recommendations, we would actually have a suggested plan for new hires, or that we would suggest that there be more thought given to new hires going forward? That I'm not
I
sure.
certainly think that more of the former and less of the latter, that we come up with something that let's face it, it's going to be, it'll be refined from here, but I think we need to state that new hires would be in these form of plans, this hybrid defined benefit type plan. And we're not deciding anything right now. What I'm doing is I'm putting an idea on the table.
So why don't you work on refining that?
Yep.
Make sure that when we come together with recommendations, that you put that forward with as much specificity as you can design. And I'm sure that there are other people around this table who'd be happy to bounce ideas around with you on what that might look like.
So I would suggest that, are you suggesting that we meet on the 9th to talk about new hires? I mean, that would be something that we would put on the agenda for that day or later on.
We certainly could. I mean, for me to be missing major chunks of time from the BAA is going to be difficult. I can get in here and do an hour here, an hour there, but I would prefer to orient on the discussions that we've had today instead of a new discussion. So if we could have that new discussion at a different time for new hires, that would be better. Thank you. Also, we're having trouble finding any other day the week of the 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 to do any other meetings. We've got the one meeting scheduled. Sounds like that's going to be the only possibility for that week anyway.
Are people available the 17th?
No. Oh, that's a Friday, yes.
I'm not sure that I can do the 17th. I can do one day the next week, but as Peter said, that's getting awfully close to Christmas, but
20th works for me.
me too. No.
The 21st also works for me.
Me too. Doesn't work for me.
Now we're starting to push.
Yeah.
Some people have family time today, depending on your, your religious.
That is very true.
Mhm. Well,
Yep, we celebrate Hanukkah. My wife's Jewish, so we're off to the in-laws after this.
Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you.
so where have we landed? Anywhere?
No.
I think we should try to meet next week.
Okay.
If we have any information back from
Okay.
the actuaries. And, if we can presume that some of the asks are slight tweaks to what they've done before, that we may have
Mhm.
a bit of information to go on. And then we can make a game plan for how we
Okay,
use the rest of our time to get to the final report and recommendations. I don't know. I mean, there
Yeah.
doesn't seem to be another time when we can
I
add a meeting.
Yeah.
And
I think you're right. And so, Peter, if you have any thoughts or anybody else has thoughts on new hires, we could put that on the agenda for next week. And
You toss them out at the end. 2 meetings in a row.
and talk about a possible public hearing and anything that has come back from the actuaries. And since that meeting might not be as full as the meeting on the 15th as crammed, Leona, did you have something you wanted to
Oh, yes.
talk about?
Do we want that on the thing? Actually, no.
Okay, oh, we'll wait until, okay,
We're off.
thank you. Yes,
I do
Molly?
have just one little request, and it doesn't have to happen on the 9th if we end up not meeting, but I had told my fourth graders I would get here early one week and take them through the state. And I was wondering if there's anyone here who would not want to be introduced at, 5 of 9, or I would do it before our meeting. Is anyone okay about everyone okay about being on a Zoom call with a bunch of fourth graders in Dumbarton?
Oh, on a Zoom call, you're gonna,
Yeah, because
Oh.
I don't think I can bring them up in April and I'm here, So I just would love to be
Sure.
able to introduce them to the State House and also to some of you or all of you. Is
Sure.
there anybody not interested in that? And if I know a little, I'd love to know if we're gonna cancel the 9th, it'd be great to know before the 8th.
Well, the
I-
9th is gonna be over.
we just got an email from Gail saying.
I did not see that yet.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think we're not gonna cancel the 9th.
there goes the deflating balloon.
We could still come through. the house.
Yeah, I can come through and then I'll just come over to y'all over there. I might be a little late on the 9th.
So on the
Yeah.
9th,
Okay.
agenda wise, I think we've talked a little bit about, there may be more one-time money available. Is there any way that we could dig into that, explore that? And, I'm wondering if there's a way we can have a conversation about revenue sources that we think that are politically feasible. And are there things we can identify as a task force that we can come to consensus on? I mean, it's pretty clear that some things are more contentious than others, but it seems to me like there's potential for some things. And as we really flesh out the details of our recommendations, I'm wondering if we can make space for that conversation.
I think we probably could on that day, make some space for that. Anything else? So what we have so we will meet on the 9th. And we will be in the pavilion building because something's happening here. I can't remember what it was, but something's happening. Moving day. You guys are, oh,
It's the fault of redistricting.
it's the creep of the house. It's a like kind of mission creep. Okay, so on the agenda, we have talk about public hearing, new hires through revenue sources, and possibly take a look at the I couldn't even remember what scheme 1 and 2, or they called scheme 1 and 2, or group 1 and 2, scenario. As, okay. Is that what we have on there for so far? Okay. All right. So. Okay, I think we're.
Corey, can you hang tight for